Welcome, everyone. My name is Summer Minerva, and I am from the Generations Project. And the Generations Project is an intergenerational LGBTQ plus storytelling organization. And we do workshops, and before COVID, we did a lot of in-person events where we came together as a community of all different ages and genders and sexualities and backgrounds to share our stories. And this is our very first live storytelling show since we closed down because of COVID. So this is a super momentous day, and I could not be more proud and excited about the stories that are about to be shared today. A little bit about this workshop. It was called Revival, and we spent the last 4 weeks curating these stories. They're all true stories. They come from the individuals' lives who are going to be sharing them very soon. The stories are very deep and very personal. 4 out of the 5 people who are sharing their stories today are survivors of HIV/AIDS, longtime survivors, which means they received their diagnosis before 1996. These are particularly strong and powerful people. I can't wait for you all to meet them. We wanted to call our storytelling show Revival because there's something that our storytellers are doing that is beyond just surviving. We're thriving, we're living, we're here to share the depth of our experiences and lives, which goes far beyond just existing. So that's why we chose the name Revival. Before I continue, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. The land of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City, including the land on which New York City AIDS Memorial sits, is the traditional homeland of the Lenape, Merrick, Canarsie, Rockaway, Matinecock, and Haudenosaunee peoples. So honoring the first peoples who were here, as well as honoring the New York City AIDS Memorial and all of the team that came together to help us be here today. So thank you so much. So our 5 storytellers, there were 10 people in our storytelling workshop. 5 will be sharing today and 5 will be coming back on June 30th. So you can get all of the stories if you so wish. And I want to talk a little bit about the diversity of the group that we had. So we had people that identify as straight, as gay, as bi, as men, as women. We had people under 40, as well as people over 70, and everywhere in between. We have married people, we have single people, we have partnered people, we have people with children, we have immigrants, and we have people who are born here. And I want to share a little bit about the timeline. This is a very shortened timeline of HIV/AIDS. I want to give people who are not aware a little bit of the context before we bring these statistics very, very personal. So if you're not aware, it was in 1981 that health officials first became aware of a strange disease that was killing young, healthy, and predominantly gay men in New York. 1984, it had already affected 7,700 people in this country and killed more than 3,500 people. And yet, the US leaders and the media were largely unresponsive to this health emergency. By the time President Ronald Reagan finally publicly used the word AIDS in 1985, it was already a full-fledged epidemic with over 12,000 deaths and over 15,000 reported cases. So we are surviving COVID now. If you just think about those numbers in relationship to what we've been experiencing in 2020 and 2021, you can make your own connections there. 1987, AZT became available. It was very expensive. This is the first kind of medication, but it could not be prescribed on its own. So it wasn't as effective as it really needed to be. In 1995, HAART became available. It was a highly active antiretroviral therapy, and that actually finally was helping to lengthen the lifespan of people who were living with AIDS. technology has evolved, and some people today, but not all, are able to take one pill. And people are still being diagnosed with HIV every day. In 2018, there were 37,968 cases confirmed in the United States. And this is an important statistic that 1 in 7 people who are HIV positive don't know that they are positive. So it is important that we all get tested regularly. It's an international issue. It's a human rights issue. It's not a moral issue. The face of AIDS has really changed from being perceived as a gay disease, which PS doesn't actually exist, to a disease and an illness that can affect anyone. Currently, 26 million people are being treated. So, some statistics. Before I call up our very first storyteller, I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you know anyone personally who has died of AIDS. And as you raise your hand, I invite you to, we're going to take a moment of silence for the people that are calling, that we want to call to in our heart, in our mind, people that we've known, people that we've lost, people that we've aspired to meet but never did. So you may close your eyes or keep them open and enjoy a moment of connection and peace. Thank you. So, our first storyteller is Bruce Ward. Bruce is an actor, a writer, and an educator, and has been writing about the AIDS epidemic for a very long time. Bruce has been coming and going from New York for 30 years. And Bruce writes a monthly column in A&U magazine. So please, let's give Bruce the warmest welcome. Thank you. That's warm. That's very warm. I appreciate that.
Thank you. You don't have to come any closer, that's fine. So one day, about 15 years ago, I was visiting my 85-year-old father in suburban Massachusetts. We were sitting around the kitchen table, each of us silently sorting our pills into pill organizers, the top for the AM, the bottom for the PM. And my father was grumbling about, I can't believe how many pills I gotta take. He didn't really sound like that, but that's okay. But I realized then that I'd been sorting pills as a 46-year-old then for 2 decades longer than my then 85-year-old father. In fact, sorting pills had become sort of a new normal for me. And through the years, I've continually been adjusting to a new normal. I was diagnosed with what was then called HTLV3 in 1986. My T cell count, which was the marker for immune suppression, was 217. The normal T cell count is 500 to 1500. I was working as an AIDS educator at the time, and I guess that my impetus was to take the bull by the horns and go into immediate action. I found a doctor in the village, not far from here, and he had mostly a gay clientele, and he was now, of course, steeped in all things AIDS. There was little to be done. There were some experimental treatments that worked in test tubes, but to separate the virus from the T cell, but nothing that had been tested in humans or in animals. One of these experimental treatments was called egg lipids. And the only place you could obtain these egg lipids was from this underground guerrilla group called the PWA, People with AIDS Coalition. So I trekked down to their makeshift offices and I purchased a lot of money for this huge jar of this viscous peanut butter-like substance. And I brought it on the subway and went up to my 5th floor walk-up studio apartment in the very seedy neighborhood known as Hell's Kitchen. And what you would do then, you would take this substance and you'd pour it into ice cube trays, and then you'd put the trays into the freezer and freeze overnight. In the morning, take out 1 ice cube, let it melt, spread it on toast, and then eat it. This did very little for my T-cell count, but I was a good doobie and I finished the jar, and I even went back down to the PWA coalition and purchased another jar, and then I left that jar on the subway. But that was the last time I tried that. At the same time I was diagnosed and taking the egg lipids, the new, as mentioned before, the first pharmaceutical treatment, AZT, came to the market. The Time magazine was doing a story on AZT, and they came into our offices. I was working as a hotline counselor operator for the New York City Health Department, and they took our photos. And lo and behold, there I was on the index cover of Time magazine, looking very nice, I must say, with a nice shirt, yes, and a corded telephone to my ear and a pencil, and a head full of curly brown hair. Can you imagine? Yes. And the photo was even larger, accompanying the article with the title, AZT, the first ray of hope in the fight against AIDS. So I was the unwitting face of hope. I didn't start taking AZT myself until 1988, 2 years later. That was a real marker for me. I knew this time, now it was serious. I remember holding that little blue and white capsule in my hand with a little unicorn on it from Burroughs Welcome. And I swallowed the pill. Who knew that I would still be taking antivirals every day for the next 33 years? And that became my new normal until it wasn't, and I became anemic and needed a blood transfusion. But then I just always managed to stay one step ahead of the virus. Other less toxic drugs came along. There was DDI, DDC, 3TC, D4T, Fusion, and then in combinations with each other. And even though these drugs may have helped to slow the progression of the virus a bit, I was still starting to get my first illnesses. I had one thing called cryptosporidium, which is as horrific as it sounds. But then the thing happened that nobody expected, the protease inhibitor cocktail in 1996 that changed the face of the epidemic. For the past 20 years, I've been on the same regimen. I'm not one of those people who can take 1 pill a day. I'm on what's called salvage therapy. I take 3 different antivirals, 5 in the morning, 5 in the evening, 10 total. And that's in addition to the other medications and injections I take for the other things that many long-term survivors get because we've been living so long with the virus. I've had 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphomas and their chemotherapies. I've had a heart attack. I have 6 stents in my arteries. I've had both my hips replaced. I am bionic. I have diabetes, arthritis, high blood pressure, neuropathy in my feet, and pills and injections for all of them. I figure I've swallowed about 100,000 antivirals in my lifetime. I'm basically held together by Elmer's glue and duct tape and the miracles of modern medicine. There are some studies that say that long-term survivors are actually 13.3 years older than our biological selves. So I'd like to think I'm not doing too badly for a 76.6-year-old man. You can do the math. So I'm always trying to adapt to a new normal. That's the only way to stay afloat. So I will continue to sort my pills every Sunday, just as I did with my father. At that kitchen table. You see Summer? I told Summer I was going to make it to the end and then I was going to start tearing up. Just as I did with my father at that kitchen table 15 years ago. Because we all of us, we're always continuing to adapt to a new normal. And I want to stick around long enough to find out what the next one will look like. Thank you.
Our second storyteller is Shirlene Cooper. And Shirlene is the founder and creative director of Visual AIDS Women Empowerment. And she'll let you know.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming out this evening. You look so lovely. So my name is Shirlene Cooper, and I was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS in 1996. Prior to that, I'm a Brooklyn-born girl. I was born in Fort Greene, the Walt Whitman houses. I am the baby of the bunch. I am the seventh daughter of 7 girls. I grew up playing in the project, low income, disenfranchised, disproportionate neighborhood. And if I was poor, you couldn't tell me nothing when I got on my roller skates and I jumped double dutch. And that's the things that I love most to do. I started babysitting my sister's children at a very young age. Of course, my oldest sister was 20 years older than me, and another one was 10, 8, 7, and 6. So they all were having babies so fast, and I was the youngest, and I started babysitting all of my sister's children. So I had to learn how to cook, clean, and keep house at a very young age. By the time I turned 17 years old and I had my own child, there was nobody around to help me. So I had a daughter who was non-HIV positive, a bouncing baby girl. And her name is Lamia. She's beautiful, she's wonderful, she's very talented, and I just adore her so much. And years later, I got married in October of 1991 to a white male. We were pregnant in 1992. We had a bouncing baby boy. His name was Keenan Hassan Algara, and he was born HIV positive. And I had no idea where he got it from because I didn't have it. I have one child who's non-HIV. So I didn't know that my husband was bisexual. And it broke my heart when my baby got sick. He got really, really ill. He had respiratory problems. We were back and forth inside the emergency room over and over again, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. One day they tested him for HIV, and he turned out HIV positive. By the tender age of 2, he got really, really ill. Christmas Eve, my baby went into a coma. So he never got to open his first bike, play with his first baseball mitt, play with his first football. And on January 4th, the doctors from Schneider Special Hospital for Children called me and said, "You need to come here because his pressure dropped and he's not going to make it to the morning." I was devastated. I was overwhelmed. I ran to the hospital. By the time I got there, he had slipped away, and he was still warm, and I couldn't believe my son was gone. And I was like, what is this disease? Where did it come from? I don't have it, so how the hell did he get it? And what's going on? Come to find out, my husband was bisexual. He was sleeping around, and our son died from it. So the results of that, I tried to kill him. And they offered me a 7.5 to 15 years in jail. He dropped the charges, of course, and I did 1 year for a weapons charge, right? So yeah, I did the 1 year, and then when I came out, I was lost, I was devastated, I was broken, I was hurt, I didn't know what direction to go. How do you live without your child, right? What are you supposed to do now? And I went straight to drugs. You know, predominantly I just went to cocaine, crack, marijuana, weed, you name it, I smoked it. I don't care what it was, because I had to numb myself. I didn't want to hurt anymore. I didn't want to wake up another day with pain from losing my child. So one day I got sick. I had a fever of 106 when I arrived to the emergency room in Brooklyn's Woodhall Hospital, and I came out of that hospital 8 months later. They diagnosed me with HIV/AIDS, cervical cancer, syphilis, and multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. And they were putting me in bathtubs full of ice. I went down to 74 pounds. I had a feeding tube in my stomach, and they told my family I only had 2 weeks to live. Fortunately, that did not happen because I'm here with you all today. So after 2 years of being bedridden, I decided, you know, hey, there's got to be more to life than this. AIDS doesn't define me. I have to figure out what I'm going to do moving forward. So I met a guy from Vocal, New York. His name was Joe Bostic, and he mentioned that they needed a syringe exchange person to come out and someone to recruit members and hand out flyers. I ended up recruiting over 2,000 members at the New York City AIDS Housing Network, now Vocal New York. I went from community organizer to lead organizer, deputy director, then the first African-American woman CEO of Vocal New York. Currently, I am the first African-American woman to sit on the City Council's HIV/AIDS Services Administration's Advisory Board. And I also always had a dream to start a women's group for women living with HIV and AIDS, because when the medications first came out, they weren't doing studies on women, they were doing studies on white gay males, and we had it too, right? So I started fooling around with Visual AIDS. Visual AIDS is the organization that started the Red Ribbon Project with art. And they gave me a $400 grant. I took that grant, and in my living room, I started a Women Empowerment Art Therapy Group with 8 women. We are now Visual AIDS Women Empowerment Art Therapy Group. We're over 300 women. We're funded by the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, also City Council. We're funded by Snooki, and we're doing wonderful today. So the moral of the story for me is my son didn't live, but he lives through me. Everything that I do for my son, because he couldn't be here to tell you his story himself. So I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for listening and feeling. We can really heal when we allow ourselves to grieve with one another and put ourselves in the shoes of another person. And it's really through storytelling that we can grow in compassion and empathy. So if you are moved by what storytellers are saying, please feel free to let them know. Our next storyteller is a Generations Project favorite. I think Reginald has told more stories with the Generations Project than possibly any other storyteller that we have. So, and it's always something. It's always something. always a new story that gets revealed from behind the veil that is Reginald Brown. Some fun facts about Reginald. Reginald loves a red nail and just got their nails painted yesterday. Yes, and another thing that I just learned about Reginald is that Reginald got their fashion sense from their father, the attention to detail, even though they didn't get along with their father. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, fashion sense, it helps. Is there anything else I wanted to say about you? No, that's all. Reginald Brown.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reginald Thomas Brown. My pronouns are they and them. I was an 11-year-old black honor student living in predominantly white Kansas City, Kansas in 1963. When on television, I saw policemen using fire hoses and attack dogs against children in the streets of Montgomery, Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. I was privileged and sheltered, so I was not able to connect with them even though they looked like me. Brentwood Hills was a black suburb in Kansas City, Kansas. I had a front yard, a backyard. There was a park across the street. I went to the best high school, junior high school, and grade school. My parents both worked, so I never had to work as a child. My mother was a nurse, so healthcare was an everyday part of my life. And my father worked for the railroad, so I always traveled. But my first travel abroad was to Chile as a foreign exchange student. When I found out I got accepted, I was over the moon. I love to travel, but the idea of going to a foreign country, that was icing on the cake. The first new Spanish word I learned was huelga. Huelga, huelga, huelga. Huelga means strike. I landed in the midst of a nationwide strike against U.S. presence in Chile to protect its financial interests in Anaconda Copper. Picture me, 17-year-old privileged gringo in the midst of all this chaos going on. It was exciting, it was exhilarating, and I was terrified. This was in June of 1969. In May 18th, 1970, I graduated from high school and moved to the campus of the University of Kansas, where I was already enrolled as a student. I moved there exactly 1 week after I graduated. I joined my first mass demonstration to honor the memory of the Kent State Four. The Kent State Four were 4 university students who were gunned down by the National Guard for opposing the Vietnam War. Immediately, I made a connection. Those children I saw in Birmingham, the citizens of Chile, and the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. I was pissed off and decided I had to do something. So I jumped into this with both feet. The demonstration was a chaos of cacophony. The policemen were barking orders. They were using pepper spray. The students were running and crying and screaming in all directions. There was pepper spray everywhere. I could not see what I was doing. I ran through a thick gray miasma of pepper spray when suddenly I heard and felt a bullet whiz past my right ear. I looked behind me, and laying in a pool of his scarlet red blood was Nick Rice, a fellow student from Leawood, Kansas. It was at that time that my privilege was replaced with a moral obligation to stand up for what I believe, even if it cost my life. Fast forward 44 years later to spring of 2014. I was arrested in Albany while reading the over 200,000 names of New York State citizens who had died due to HIV because of government inaction. And I did this so that all income eligible people who are living with HIV could get enhanced housing, health care, and travel. So there were about 5 or 6 of us who rotated reading names. So I was reading these names, these pages. Every now and then I would see my name on a page, and I would see the name of somebody that I knew on the page. And then it became painfully aware to me that these names were actually people. So when I got to a page that had 2 people that I knew, Louis Fulgoni was an artist I modeled for in Chelsea, and Paul Lipscomb sang in the baritone section with me with the Martin Luther King Junior Family Choir in Harlem. I lost it. My path from privilege to power to protest means that I fight evil for a living, to lay my life on the line so that I can stand up for what I believe no matter the cost. I stood up for people to get what I already had. In 1968, a doctor told me to get my affairs in order because I would be dead in 2 years. Well, my faith and spirituality kicked in and said, hey, look at this. There are actually 3 blessings in this. The first blessing is I don't have to worry about getting HIV anymore. The second blessing is that it taught me the importance of prioritizing. This is important, that's not, and it's non-negotiable because mine is the only voice that counts. And the most important blessing was that no matter how long I live, I'm going to live until I die. I have been HIV positive almost half of my 69 years. I've been undetectable since 2003 and had no AIDS-related illnesses. Not only am I a long-term AIDS survivor, I am a long-term life thriver. Thank you.
Don't leave without your party gift.
My first. Thank you.
Fine wine. Let's give it up for Reginald Brown, everybody. Living legends before us. I mean, these are the reason why we started the Generations Project, or the reason why Wes Enos started and the rest of us joined, is because we want to have the agency to tell our own stories. We don't want any mainstream storytelling to come in and erase our individual narratives. History is created by people, and so the Generations Project exists so that we get to tell our own stories. We get to be the keepers of our own stories. We have been archiving stories for years. We are definitely claiming our place in history through the practice of crafting and sharing storytelling, which one might argue is one of the oldest art forms, whether it came through words, or it came through sounds, or it came through dance, or it came through hieroglyphs. Storytelling is definitely one of the most amazing and important parts of being human and how we connect to one another. So, that being said, let's continue on with our show. We have two more storytellers. Our next storyteller is Roberta Denore. I know it in Italian. Roberta Denore. And yes, Roberta is a self-identified eclectic Renaissance woman who just finished a memoir called Me and the Man Who Made Mapplethorpe. One more round of applause, one warm welcome for the Roberta Denore.
Grazie.
Prego.
Grazie, Mother. It's great. Well, I come from a little different place than the others who are here today, and I'm honored to be here. For me, it was a little different because of this different place. And one of the places was was Fire Island at the beginning of a hurricane, and me and my friend were standing in the waves, and I should have been worried about drowning because 6 foot tall him had already been sucked under and come back. But what I was worried most about was dropping the joint in my hand and losing the bottle of Amyl that we were passing between us. But that was the end of the 1970s, and it was all parties and fun, and we thought we were invincible, and we thought those days would never end. But then another storm was starting up, and in 1981, 1982, we started hearing about that new disease, the gay men who were dying. But even then, my friend, an art collector, an elegant man, and also a little silly, said, "That's happening in San Francisco. That's not here." And they'll come up with something to cure it. They always do. Well, so in 1982, while that was going on, we didn't change anything we were doing. We snorted coke at the Pavilion on Fire Island. We snorted coke at the Palladium here. We snorted coke in the mine shaft. We snorted coke at gallery openings. We would sneak into stairwells and do it. So we danced in the storm. And again, we thought it would never end. And he was precious to me this man because he was like the brother I never had, although I had one. and I trusted him like he trusted me. So when the red rash on his feet clung to him from Fire Island into the city, we ignored it. They'll come up with something. They always do. Later, something happened. My friend spiked the temperature, 101, 102, 103. And I said, you've got to go to the hospital. And I had to fight with him to get him to St. Vincent's. I had to fight his denial that rash, this fever, was nothing. They'll come up with something. So. And by the time 1985 came around, I watched AIDS destroy his beauty. I would go to his place in the morning and he would have a blue cast to his face. And I'd go out and do whatever and come back and he'd be green. I mean green. And I didn't say anything about it because I wanted to protect him. I didn't want him to know what he looked like and how frightened I was of that. But one day, when I went there, he was in his bed and he had just had a delivery of his latest acquisitions. He was buying pieces for his collection all the while, and as long as he could. So there he was in bed, and around him were the pieces he had just bought and the packing stuff and the boxes. And in those days, the olden days, invoices were in triplicate, and they had carbon paper in between them. If any of you are old enough to remember that from that generation. So there was that inkly, crinkly carbon paper. And we were talking, I looked at him and I chastised him jokingly. I said, look at you. You've leaned on the carbon paper and you've made your palms all inky. They're blue. And his palms were blue, just his palms. So I said, wait a minute, as I should have said now. And I stepped into the bathroom to get a washcloth. When I came out, he had changed. He was staring at his trembling hands, and he was very quiet. And kind of like a little boy who's been caught doing something they shouldn't, he was looking at those blue palms, and he said, I think it's just me. And I let that stupid washcloth drop from my hand, and I have never been so angry at myself for forgetting that anything that was happening to him wasn't from any normal cause, that I had forgotten that, wow, it wasn't from any kind of carbon paper. And with that, it was even clearer. This man, this friend, who had given me so much in experiences, in meeting people, in art, I now had to give to him. And I became a caregiver, a very unlikely and very angry caregiver. I didn't want to grow up. I was angry at AIDS. I was angry at him. How could you stop our fun times? How could this be happening? Of course, those are the kind of feelings you don't say and you don't admit until you can admit it decades later. But starting in 1985, I had to watch what AIDS was doing to him. He went from an elegant man to a skeleton with trembling hands and with phrases that were halting and sometimes with sentences that made no sense. So, becoming a caregiver, there was not much to do but be there for him. And by the time 1986 came, I was still trying to relate to him in the same way. I had always been able to make the great man laugh. I would make him laugh by calling him that. But by the end of 1986, he couldn't see anymore, and he couldn't talk anymore. But he heard me. At the very end, he was silent, but he was restless. And I told him stories to try and make him comfortable, and it seemed to work. When he was restless, I said, come on, what's going on? Don't worry. Hey, is it like an acid trip? Like the many stories that we used to share about acid trips. And he seemed to calm. That would calm him. So there was a little something that was left. But watching AIDS change him, watching AIDS murder him, changed me too. And it didn't. I had to be an adult, and I didn't want to be an adult. And never again, kind of. I'm mature now without having matured. Kind of like a bad cheese, I guess. I saw too much, and I never wanted to do that again, to go through those storms again. But one thing I learned is I remember what I could do and what I made myself do, and I can be an adult. I still party. I travel the world alone to prove that I can. I still pick up women. And I've found that I can dance through any storm, and what I'm going to do is keep on dancing, because I'm not going to pay any attention to my end.
So are y'all wondering what's going to happen next after you've just been floored by one amazing human being after the next? Are you at the edge of your seat? Our final storyteller for this evening is an amazing woman named Victoria Graves. And Victoria, she is born and bred Brooklynite. And I asked her how she wanted to be introduced, and she said, "Just tell them I love to dance." So before she does her story, she's gonna perform a dance for everybody. There we go. She's giving you a rumba. And Victoria Graves.
Thank you. I'm nervous. I don't do this, so I'm going to do my best. I was feeling very overwhelmed, just thinking about the journey. So please forgive me for that too. My name is Victoria Graves Cade. I am a diehard Brooklynite, proud of it. And my journey began February of 1994. I was a wife, mother of 3 toddler sons, working full-time and fatigued. And one evening, my coworker and I said, let's take the anonymous test. And we did. And I didn't think about it anymore. 2 weeks went past, and she called me in her office, and she pushed the ledger over to me for me to look for my fake name. And I scrolled across and down and over, and it said positive. Well, she busted out in tears. She couldn't post-test me. I left there and I went to a girlfriend's office and I just cried. I said, oh God, I've infected my sons. And she hugged me and she said, we're going to be all right. And she prayed for me. And that day I left early. When I got home later that evening, I called my husband, my father, my mother, and my sister to our family room, and I told them what happened. And we cried some more and we prayed, and we decided we have to get our sons tested. Well, that was the longest 2 weeks I had ever had to endure, waiting for those results. They were negative. Thank you, God, I said. Thank you, God. What followed was denial. If they're negative, something must be wrong with my test. You know, back then, there was false negatives, false positives, and I was ready to jump into that. There's something wrong with my test. May of 1995, a whole year later, I was talking with a friend, and I was whining, and I was saying, oh, why is this happening to me? What's going on? And now I'm chronic fatigued. And she looked me in the eye and she said, why not you? Wow. Why not me? I wasn't always a wife and a mother. I didn't always do things right. And it was a revelation, like a flood of emotions, acceptance, finally. She sent me to this program, this world-renowned program. I went, and of course they took another test. The results were the same, positive. But this time, I had millions of copies of the virus in my body, and I had a T cell of 71. I have AIDS. I go into the doctor's office, and she put on her gloves, she put on her mask, she put on her goggles. She didn't even recognize me as a person. She poked and prodded, gave me a cup to urinate in. And in the silence, because I could remember what people were saying, I got up the nerve to ask about disability papers. And she said, you don't need to worry about that. You won't make it through the process. I remember leaving that office so afraid, so scared, so just hopeless, thinking I'll never see my sons graduate elementary school. I'll never see them do anything. I went down the hall and I got on the payphone and I called my friend that sent me there and I told her what happened. She said, do you want me to come and get you? I said, no, I'm just gonna sit still and I'll take a cab home. I went back into the waiting room and a young woman walked over to me, a stranger, and she hugged me and she sat down and she told me her name and told me her story. She said, it's gonna be okay. I've got 71 T cells and I'm not worried. She gave me her phone number and told me to call her later that evening. They referred me to a support group that met that Saturday and I went. And those women loved me, hugged on me, and just supported me, let me tell my story. And they told me and they convinced me and gave me the strength to go that next week and file a complaint against that doctor with the administration. And in that support group, they were talking about a doctor that was saving lives. And I went to him, and the first day I met him, he didn't put on gloves, he didn't put on a mask or goggles, he touched me with his bare hands. And that day, I decided I'm gonna live. I'm gonna fight to live, to raise my sons. 26 years, he has seen me through some life and death situations. I've been on a rough journey to make it here. And he's my angel and my friend. I was able to see my sons graduate high school, go on to college, study nursing, join the armed forces, and have my grandchildren. It's 27 years. I'm 62 years young, and I advocate for women with HIV, and I educate older adults on knowing their status, treatment and care, and prevention. And I'm living vibrantly as I age. That's one of our workshops. This is not a moral disease, and we're as sick as our secrets. I know today, why not me?
I have so much gratitude and respect. I mean, speaking publicly is not easy, period. And the things that have been revealed today, and the depth and the detail, it's incalculable. Like, your stories are saving lives. I have been told for years that I am part of an at-risk population, that I should really start taking PrEP. And I was always like, no, I don't need that. And your words, Victoria, why not you? Saved my life. Like, I've made a huge pivot in my life as a result of working with you and all of your stories, and I want you all to know that. So thank you. So we have something really fun that's about to happen. But before we have that, I want to actually have another moment of silence. So before, our moment of silence was for those that we lost. And this time, I want to have a moment of silence for the lives that we have yet to live, and the fact that we are here and we are all alive now, and we have this one life. And I want to honor that fact, because sometimes we can forget that at any moment something could change. So we may never gather together again. Hopefully we all go on to see more days. But I would like to offer a moment of silence for the celebration of the lives that we have yet to live. Thank you. And to help us live, we have an amazing singer named Castrata, who will be coming up to grace us with her voice.
Hi, everyone. Oh, this mic is great. I love it. I love it. So, like Summer said, my name is Castrata. I am a local live singing drag queen here in New York City. And listening to your stories was magical and transformative for me. I actually lost my grandmother to HIV/AIDS when I was very young, and I never got to have the relationship with her that I wish I had. So I'm gonna sing something very special to me and to her, and I hope it resonates with you tonight on this special day. And it's gonna be a cappella, 'cause that's life. When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane, just a step beyond the rain. what I heard of once in the lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Then oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? Thank you. Thank you so much.